How are you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. We have Elizabeth here today, and I'm Allison, one of the co-owners.
Hello. Hi. Hi, Allison. Hi, Elizabeth. It's so lovely to meet both of you.
Oh, we are beyond excited. I mean, and I don't think we tell every author that.
Oh,
I mean, to be frank, I was telling even my business partner, I was like, I cannot wait for tonight. I have so many questions. It's gonna be so
we're
fun.
gonna have fun. I'm really excited. Thank you so much. Again, I'm like so thrilled. Elizabeth, thank you so much for reaching out. I'm so happy this is finally happening. I feel like I've been looking forward to this since like last year.
I know. I read this in October and I was, oh my goodness. So it's always good. I read books super far in advance, and then Allison reads it closer to time. So we can get the authors and then have a refresh. But this book, wow.
Yes. I think she even in October said this is going to be one of my favorites for 2023.
Yep.
And I was like, that is a bold statement. And I'm paying attention. And I will be sure to read this one.
Yes.
So yes, I'm so excited. We have a huge group that has signed up. So I'm so excited for everyone to be here.
Oh, good.
Just came on a few minutes early, just a small talk and, warm up the crowd, if you will.
Now, Parini, you went to UT, correct? Is that?
Yes. For my MFA. Yes, I studied.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Did you get do the writing program? Is that right? With
Yes, exactly. For creative writing, fiction. It was the best 2 years of my life. I know that the city's changed a lot, but I look back on my time there with like such nostalgia, and I feel like it was the most productive, happy, peaceful time of my life.
Oh, I love it. And you're in California now, is that right?
I am, yes.
Okay.
That's so fun. I was born in Berkeley.
Oh, I'm in the South Bay, so just the bridge. Yeah.
Yes. I don't know. I mean, obviously I don't remember it because I was just a teeny babe, but it is so beautiful there. Anytime we go back there, I'm like, this is why it's so expensive, because it's so wonderful here. The weather's so great. People are so cool. So my parents always like, for kicks, look at like the real estate there, and they're like, yeah, that's just so expensive.
Those are some depressing kicks. I'm like,
I know that's true. Maybe they like look at it in an anticipation of what they own in Texas and being like, oh, well, see, we couldn't go today.
Like all the space and not, well,
Yes.
Yeah, it's pricey out here. It's it's enough to make a lot of people move, it's like
Totally. Yes, I have my brother and his wife lived there for a little bit. He's an engineer, and she worked at Pottery Barn, corporate. And then I think they were like, this is just, we're doing our best, but we just can't have a normal life. Like, it's just so they moved down to Orange County, where funny enough, they have a beautiful home, and she works for PacSun corporate, and he's he specializes in earthquakes.
Yeah, well, arguably that's even better weather there. So, they kind of, leveled up.
Yes, exactly. It's so crazy though, the prices, but it's so beautiful there. And I love anytime I get the opportunity to go there.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, we might start since it's already past 7. And I know we'll have more people trickle in. If I'll give a quick introduction. I am Allison Frenzel. I'm one of the co-owners here at Fabled. If you were a part of our winter preview, which was last week, then long time no see. We were just here promoting the Bandit Queens and talking about how wonderful it is. And I know that you were tempted to buy it if you are here, because it's so wonderful. We have a chat where you can post any questions that you have. We also have a Q&A where you can post any questions as well. We have made a list of questions ourselves for Parini, but if you have anything, we will try to get to everybody's questions. Also, this will be recorded. So if for some reason you have to step out for kids or life or whatever, this will be sent to you 24 hours later. So no worries. You will get every single minute that we have with her. And if you have any questions in the chat, or if you want to just post where you're from, I love to always know where everybody's from, because we're located in Waco, Central Texas, but we amazingly have customers from all over who have adopted us as their indie bookstore, which is so amazing and humbling. So yeah. I will let Elizabeth officially introduce our author tonight, and then we'll launch into our questions.
All right. Well, and again, I'm Elizabeth Barnhill, and I'm the book buyer at Fabled. And again, this gem, I have been dying to talk to Parini since October, when I knew I was going to do everything we could to have it as a book club pick. So Parini Shroff received her MFA from the University of Texas at Austin, where she studied under Elizabeth McCracken, Alexander Chi, and Christina Garcia. She is a practicing attorney and currently lives in the Bay Area. The Bandit Queens is her debut novel. And I wanted to explain a little, when I read this book, we have a partnership with a podcast, and they ask us every January to pick books for them, sort of like a book club pick, and it's with 2,000 women. And the Bandit Queens was the first one I chose for that event. So they have a private Facebook group, and everyone has just been going gaga over the Bandit Queen. So I'm really proud that I was able to introduce it. And finally, I read it, and then I messaged my publisher rep, and I said, I love this book so much. I just want to make sure it's not going to be, a big book club book. And they said, I don't think so. But then, of course, right before it came out, it was, it's the Barnes and Noble book club pick. So that was a big surprise. But I'm just so thrilled that a debut novel like this one is getting so much attention. And that's one of the things we love about being an indie bookstore, is highlighting these fantastic debut books and authors. So anyway, but I would love for you, to Parini, to kind of give us a brief recap of the book. I'm sure most of us have read it fairly recently, but just, can you give us your elevator pitch of the Bandit Queens?
Absolutely. The Bandit Queens is a dark comedy. It follows Geeta, who is an artisan living in a village in modern day India. Everybody in the village thinks she killed her husband. She didn't. He disappeared on her. But it's a rumor that she goes along with because it serves to have its advantages, especially for her business, until the other wives of the village start demanding Geeta's help, because they too would like to become self-made widows. And events start to spiral. The body count gets higher, and Geeta and these women must make choices to support themselves as well as each other.
Love it.
I remember vividly, we go through a lot of books in publisher catalogs. I vividly remember when Elizabeth saw this book and told me the premise, and I was like, okay, whoa, that is so interesting and hilarious. And I have to read for sure. So yeah, I wanted to mention that.
Allison,
I think Elizabeth, your question is first. So, but if you have any in the chat that you would like to ask Parini, we have those available.
Well, some of the commentary on this book is that people love it because it's sort of a feminist rage type of literature. And that seems to be a genre that people love. That's not necessarily one that I love. I loved it anyway, but what I've heard about it is they love that it's feminist rage, but it's not exactly, you're not using spells or superpowers to get their goals accomplished, just women supporting women. Was this important to you to write women whose superpower was really just survival and grit?
Absolutely. I think that a lot of the novel, while there's murder and there's a bit of mystery, most of the novel are these characters, these women, realizing that their impressions of each other initially aren't who they are. Geeta is not the hardened pariah that she comes across. Saloni is not the bully that she comes across. Farah is also not what she seems. And I think the heart of the novel are these women speaking to each other, connecting, realizing that they've made assumptions about one another, and getting over those assumptions and their differences to bind together to take down the patriarchy. And that's the magic, rather than spells or supernatural things. It's very I think it's grounded in that respect.
So great. One of the things I absolutely loved about this book was the genre mashup of like dark humor, social commentary on Indian culture, murder mystery. It was so unique. like, do you call this type of writing a certain genre, or has this always been your style? Tell us. I just feel like it's really unique. So I'd love to hear some background into your writing style.
Thank you so much for that. And I'm happy to hear that the comedy worked for you and hopefully it works for those joining us today. Thank you to everybody for joining us. I truly, it's different than anything I've written before. I have written other fiction, short stories, other manuscripts, and the humor was not there. There was not much levity. Well, I was addressing a lot of these same issues that I address in the Bandit Queens, but without the kind of irreverence that the Bandit Queens has. And I think the insertion of the humor was twofold. Partly, I needed levity because I wrote this novel in 2020 during the grim pandemic days when I think a lot of us were seeking joy. So the comedy crept in there, and I rejected it at first because I didn't want to minimize these issues that I'm discussing, such as casteism, misogyny, abuse of various kinds. I didn't want to be disrespectful, but I couldn't keep rejecting it because it was fighting its way in. And so eventually I just leaned into it, and I was like, wait, this could actually serve me. It serves to not minimize what I'm addressing, but to heighten it as well as entertain. And if you can entertain while educating, I mean, that's the best.
Yeah, the way I described it to our listeners was I was outraged and laughing on every single page. And how do you, I mean, that was a pretty neat mashup.
Yes. And it was, I mean, I just love women who are funny, and I legitimately laughed out loud. I don't remember the last time I have done that in a book. There are a couple lines I just were like, this is so funny, and could envision it so much. Just their commentary to each other was just, I'm almost like, is she been a comedian? This is funny. Do you have a comedy background?
That is such high praise. Wow. No, but I love comedy in various forms, especially in sitcoms. Sitcoms have been a huge part of my life. It's actually my mother and I watching sitcoms with the subtitles on was how we learned English. Wow. And how we became more and more fluent. And not only fluent in the language, but also fluent in comedy, physical comedy, written comedy, beats, lines, one-liners, banter, right? And I think that comedy is hardwired into me. And with this novel, I was finally able to just let it be instead of maybe pushing it to the side like I had done with my earlier projects.
Yeah. Oh, it worked for you. It was so good. For sure.
All right, Allison, go ahead and do your next question.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, we have mixed it up. That's why I was like, Elizabeth's next. No, wait, I'm next, you know. Okay, so since we're a book club, everybody's read the book, so spoilers are welcome. So if you've not finished the book, feel free to close the chat and listen to this later, because we will be spoiling everything. I would like to know if you envision Geeta and, I don't know if I pronounce this name correctly, Kareem. Yes. If you envision them ever getting together, or do you think Geeta will stay with her husband?
Ramesh, absolutely not. Like, they get that divorce that she seeks in the epilogue. Thankfully, he's out of her life. Can't happen soon enough, at least in my mind.
Yes.
Kareem is more of an open-ended question. I think that they will stay together for as long as they enjoy each other, like they promised. And Geeta's business is going to come first, and Kareem's children are going to come first for him. And I think the point of them having that second chance at romance was that we view romance differently. Geeta was married at 19, and that she had a completely different perception of romantic love versus when we meet her in the novel when she's 37. And I think the idea was, let them be happy for as long as they enjoy each other, because there are no guarantees. And truly, the point isn't to get Geeta married again. I think like her views on marriage, views on like having a Mangalsutra and all that is not necessarily key to her happiness. But I definitely think Kareem is a part of her life, not only because he is a romantic interest, but he's also her friend. Mm-hmm. And that's like, I think, the real basis of that relationship. And of course, the a prevalent theme throughout the whole book is just that friendship.
Mhm.
Speaking of friendship, that's a great segue. Another way I describe this book is it was almost like it was a platonic love story between Geeta and Salone. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
The friendship was more important than the actual love story, which is kind of refreshing in a book these days. Can you talk about Geeta and Salone's relationship?
All day I can talk about them. I love them so much.
Me too.
This novel started off as a short story a decade ago in 2013, and Salone was a very minor character. She and Geeta had some animosity, but the real tension of that short story was Farah approaching Geeta for help to dispose of Farah's abusive husband. And Salone was kind of in the background, being obnoxious and judging people. But when I reread the short story in 2020, when I realized it could be a novel potentially, I was super curious about Salone. I was like, what is this antagonism they have with each other? And I used Farah's question as a sort of way to interrogate myself as to what I thought about the relationship. And Farah says it herself. She says, usually when there's that kind of hatred, there's a history, there's a story behind it. And I knew right then, I was like, oh, they used to be best friends. That's why they can't stand each other now, because something went down. And as soon as I realized that that was the backstory of Salone and Geeta, their estrangement, then it opened up this lovely arc where their reunion and their redemption, their second chance at friendship, could be what propelled it forward. And it really opened up lots of avenues and comedy. Like when Geeta and Salone are together, I feel like the quips and the banter really write themselves. Their voices are so explosive in my mind, or were explosive in my mind.
Love it.
I love it. Well, I know I read in the note in the back of the book that the story's concept came to you when you were observing, was it your father who was helping some women with microloans in India?
Yeah, he was involved in my thing, yeah.
Okay, cool. I don't know if you have more knowledge to kind of explain the idea of microloans to us. I mean, we observed it in the book, but can you give more, I guess, depth to that concept?
Sure. As far as I'm aware, because they vary and they do take on different, interest rates, and whether it's a nonprofit versus a bank who's getting involved. But the idea is that you extend loans to women in communities, close-knit communities, such as these villages. You extend these minor loans that banks are not interested in because they yield such low percentages of interest. You extend these loans, and the women repay these minor loans that won't ruin them. Like many loans ruin farmers in rural areas, especially if there are droughts or the crop doesn't yield. So these are meant to be very small loans at very low interest rates that are then used exclusively for women to build local businesses. And the idea is that it's not charity, because it is a loan that will be repaid, and the group is responsible for each other. These women are responsible for the loan together, and that kind of accountability makes it work in a space that it wouldn't with men, because men feel less socially obligated to each other in a way that women, yeah.
That's so interesting. So I was trying to think of it as almost like someone co-signing a loan for you, but there's a more communal aspect to it.
Absolutely. They get together, and like a loan, like there's multiple loans maybe within a village, but each microloan group will have, say, 5 women like this group. And together they're responsible for repaying that loan in a timely manner.
So interesting, fascinating.
All right, can you talk a little bit about the actual legend of the Bandit Queen? Maybe to recap her story, and what about her story inspired you to write the Bandit Queens?
Yeah. So Phoolan Devi lived such a brief but electric life, and it ran the extremes in often tragic ways. it was very clear when she was 10, she committed her first act of protest, which landed her in jail. Like, it was very clear that she was an irrepressible spirit, which is likely why her family married her off to a much older man. She was 11, he was 33. It was an abusive relationship. She ran away multiple times before eventually joining a gang. And once she joined this gang, she both committed and was subjected to a series of violent crimes. Ultimately, she took vengeance on her abusers and was jailed. She spent 11 years imprisoned before her release. And then she became a politician and a female and adult rights activist until she was assassinated at the age of 37. So just a short but electrifying, just what a life. And I have known about the myth and the legend of the Bandit Queen, of India's Bandit Queen and Phulan Devi for, I can't remember not knowing about it. I feel like I've known it for so long. And I was wary of including it in the novel because I didn't want, so many have exploited her. I didn't want to use her story for my own agenda. That felt wrong. But as I sat with Geeta's character and sat with her isolation, it became clear that when Geeta is despised, disrespected, outcast in this village, she would need inspiration and power from a source larger than just herself to get out of bed every day, to face these people who mock her, to face these people who call her a witch and got like all these other names. And I thought that this could be a way to honor Phulan Devi by having my characters see her as a source of inspiration for their own choices and to pull them out of their darkness.
I think it's so interesting also how women authors now, there is this rising movement to elevate women's stories we don't know about. So we would never have, so you didn't exploit her. It was more to highlight her so we can know about her in Central Texas and all of us are, around here. So I love that you included that.
Thank you.
Yes, I was Googling as I read, which is always a good sign of a well-researched novel for sure. I had a copy of the book, and then this is just, of course, what you do with a good book. I pushed it into the hands of our bookshop manager today and was like, you have to read it. So I wanted to talk about the cover though, so I don't have a visual, so you can just imagine. But I see behind you, you have
Yes, I will. Here we go.
Yes, it's so
this cover. It's beautiful. The team did such an amazing job. I'm just so thrilled with it. Truly, like, I love the colors. I feel like I might be reading too much into this, but I feel like it's such a great blend of the tone. Like, you have the darkness, you have the issues, and that's the black, but then you have like the vibrancy of these characters and the comedy, and that's the color. Plus, I just love these shady eyes. Look at these, they're up to something. These are up to things.
And the one lady who has the nose ring and one doesn't.
Exactly, the remove, and that common theme, like remove my nose ring, make a widow out of me. I loved that the cover just addressed all these elements, and I fell in love with it.
What's the other cover that we're seeing?
And this is my, okay, so in the UK, the Bandit Queens will come out March 2nd, and this is that cover, which is honestly, I'm very fortunate to have two beautiful covers because, again, you have the darkness with the henna hands, but then the color popping, it's just beautiful.
Is that gold leaf?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, we always laugh. They had the greatest gold leaf, with in those UK covers. So it looks like we may have lost Allison. So I'm the boss now. I'm the captain now.
I'll follow you wherever you go, Elizabeth.
That's right. All right. So we loved Bandits. And of course, we were so worried that she was going to die. So I'm so thankful that she is fine. Did you start out thinking that the dog would steal our hearts and kind of steal the show in the novel like Bandit did?
I'm so happy to hear that. I hope to rectify this year, but I've never owned a pet. However, when I was writing this in 2020, I was renting out an in-law unit, and the main house during the quarantine adopted a dog. And so since we share the communal area and the yard, we kept like food and treats and water near our in-law unit because it was a big property line. And so I got very familiar with Cookie. That's the dog that my landlords adopted. And I think Cookie just inspired me to have a dog in the novel. Like, she was always there. She was just greedy for pets, like just insatiable when it came to pets. From everything from the way she'd lap water to roll over to just running around. I think I observed that, and then it ended up in the novel, because otherwise, like, me not having experience with pets or dogs, I would have been so ignorant. But this just Cookie just bled right into the novel. And then we have Bandit, who also stole my heart.
Yes. Yeah, I have a cat. I really want to own a dog one day, but I love to read about dogs. I don't think the thought of owning a dog is frightening to me, but I love reading about them. I don't know why. People do it all the time, but okay.
So lovable and loyal. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about the different villains in the story. So these women were faced with oppression from so many men in their lives, but we loved how the villains, the men, really seemed human and relatable as well. So can you talk a little bit about how you created these villains in the novel?
Yes. All right. So initially, Ramesh and Samir. Ramesh is Geeta's husband who disappeared, and Samir is Farah's husband, who they kill, because spoilers are allowed. They were there from the onset. Basically, I needed to isolate Geeta at the beginning of the novel, and that's why her husband left her. I think she did, and I needed Farah to kind of seek Geeta's counsel, such as it is. But then the other villains, the Don Butterby, he came from a source of comedic relief, and also because casteism is something I address throughout the novel, and I really thought it was important to have Butterby he's a buffoon. He's not kind of the threat to Geeta that Ramesh is. Yes, Butterby's a Don, but he's hapless, right? Like, he's trying to get a Don reputation, but he's not very good at anything he does. And so because casteism is such a prevalent issue, I wanted Butterby's downfall as a villain to be his prejudice. I wanted to address his stereotypes and his discrimination, have it be his downfall. I wanted it to be like, this is why, because casteism is dark and pernicious and terrible, and it's also absurd. And I wanted to highlight that absurdity by poking fun at Butterby, who is someone who subscribes to the construct of caste.
Yeah. Allison, we're happy to see you again.
Yeah.
I did get a text from Haley that said that Elizabeth says she's in charge now.
Yeah. Now, Haley, you're
not like all part of the plan.
I was thinking we're having really bad weather in Waco, so I thought maybe you were.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I know. I was like, well, okay. I even was like telling my kids, like, get off the internet. Like, there's someone who has to be streaming a video game. And everyone was like, we're not even on, Mom. So anyways, so I'm back. Hey, guys.
Great. Well, we were just talking a little bit about the villains, and you again, such a great job, Parini, with segueing into my next question, because last year, last February, almost probably a year ago today, we talked to Thridi Umrigar because I loved her book Honor. She talked so much about the caste system in India, which is just fascinating to me. And I have some questions. We have some questions about that because, again, not that Americans, we certainly have our own issues, but the caste system is hard to understand. I know that Dalit, am I saying that correctly? Right. So it seems like, I mean, the untouchables, they're, the men and women are basically lower than dirt, but are the upper caste systems always also that way with just the women? And I'm also curious, what Indian Americans, do they recognize the caste system at all? Or is it just something that happens in India? I mean, I'm just very curious, your take on it, to educate us.
Absolutely. So there are four main castes. There are many, many subcastes that your surname can reveal, but there are 4 main castes, and Dalits are low castes, but technically outcasts. They're not even part of the 4. And there's lots of issues with, and I know Honor touched upon this, the pollution and the purity, right? Higher castes won't do certain jobs because they feel it pollutes their purity, and these tasks are given to Dalits or lower castes. And you also talked about the role of women within that, and I would say that within every caste, because of patriarchy, women will be seen as second-class citizens, even if they are of a higher caste. And so that's why the character Pulan Devi was born in a village. She's a Dalit woman, and therefore like twice trodden, once by virtue of caste and second by virtue of her gender. And that's really where the character of Kushi was inspired by, because she's a Dalit woman living in a village, and she's not part of the microloan group because she can't be because of her caste, and yet she has manipulated the caste system to serve herself economically by doing the task. She's a corpse burner, and that is a polluting task, and people won't do it, so she can charge what she wants. And she's manipulated, and I think it's just another theme of like Geeta manipulates the way people see her for her advantage. Kushi does the same thing. Saloni and Farah are also manipulative, and I think these women, you know, they're so resourceful. They make something where they're given nothing, and I am in awe of them, and women everywhere who manage this on a daily basis to survive and provide for themselves and their children. And finally, you also asked a question about the US and other places, and unfortunately, caste is bleeding over. I've seen reports of Dalit students and graduates who come to the States or come to the UK for job opportunities, and if there are Indians already working there, if there's an Indian CEO, he knows by virtue of dietary habits or surnames what caste that other Indian person is, and it can lead to ostracization, even though you've crossed a sea, right? So unfortunately, it's so pernicious and so insidious that it's traveling out instead of being eradicated within.
That's so interesting. I had no idea.
Wow. Well, on the topic of women and the female relationships in the novel, which I loved, and I felt like they felt realistic to me. I mean, I live in the same town I grew up, so I have many relationships around here that I've had for a long time. And these relationships portrayed in the book show the strength of the women, but also like the petty part of women, like arguments and rivalries. But within their world that they're living in and kind of exerting their own feminism, do you feel like that's an accurate portrayal of something that would happen today in India, in a rural village like they were living in?
So much of the novel is I've taken to extremes and hyperbole, like the women's reaction to circumstances such as like murder, like, oh, right, the logical only way out of this, the only elegant solution out of this is murder. That is an extreme reaction. But I went to a hyperbolic state to kind of lift a mirror of like, well, what are the circumstances that lead to such an extreme reaction? And these women's circumstances are extreme, and maybe not so many vile men in such a concentrated location. But again, that was a technique that I used, the exaggeration, to make a point of, let's examine these circumstances that are awful and extreme, but are normalized. Abuse is normalized in this village. Caste is normalized in this village. The misogyny and the patriarchy and the mourning of daughters and celebrating of sons, all of that exists. Dowries exist. Caste is legally eradicated, it's still practiced. All of these are realities, and yes, I know that I have described them in short order, but it is real, and I did it to prove a point. But as for sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about the ending. Was that always your plan, or did you have alternate endings for the story?
I had 16 endings to this story.
Wow.
I was very fortunate. The novel, as I've said, in 2020 kind of fell out in pretty much the same manner that it reads today, except for the last 2 chapters. The last 2 chapters probably took me as long to write as the rest of the novel combined. It just wasn't working, and I really wanted to give readers a satisfying ending. And finally, through the process of elimination, I had to figure out what wasn't working in order to get to what was. And that is something I would not have been able to do without like my agent and my editors and just like a village to help guide me. So the ending, lots of alternate endings. I believe this is the best one. And in terms of, gosh, I know spoilers are okay, but it still feels so weird. In terms of how the women extricate themselves from Butterfly, I knew that it couldn't be force or violence. I knew they were going to have to use their wits. I knew they were going to have to use, as we mentioned, I knew they were going to have to use his prejudices against him to take him down. And as for Ramesh, I think, yes, on some level, I knew that Geeta would have to take extreme steps. I think that she was going to not necessarily enact revenge on him, because at that point in the novel, she's found herself, she has no use for him. But when she finds out that Ramesh has been complicit in the assault of these young Dalit girls, and he knew this entire time, and that kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge, like, I know this behavior, this rape culture is happening, but it's not really my problem. That sets her over the edge, that he was not only abusive to her, but he allowed these young girls to be assaulted. And that's when she just loses it. And I think that hopefully is a very satisfying moment for readers. I understand it's, vigilante justice, but yeah, hopefully there's closure there and poetic justice because of how Ramesh ends up, because he does live.
I think there was a part of me that even because Ramesh was still alive, I was nervous that she was not going to get out of the marriage. But
Yeah.
even though he's signing, I'm like, I don't know. Like, it just made me so nervous just because of the trapped feeling that you felt as a reader in that marriage.
Yeah.
Okay, so when I read this, I was, of course, loving it and thought it was so excellent. And then was like, hold on, this is a debut novel. Like, that was so surprising to me. And what is it like being a debut author? Which, I mean, I know as someone who's like worked on things, and then sometimes you work on a bunch of projects and then one project gets a lot of attention and you're like, well, I've done actually all this other work in the past, and then just this one project got of attention. So I'm sure, especially since you went to UT and did the MFA there, that you have worked on lots of novels and stories and stuff like that. But kind of tell us about what it's like to get so much attention, kind of your first foray out there in the publication world.
It's wonderful. I mean, the story in this book are very close to my heart. It is not the first project I've worked on, but it is the quickest I've ever written anything. And I think that for me, that feeling of, wow, it's really clicking. And every day I can't wait to wake up and return to these characters. That's something I'll cherish. It is a strange feeling. You work with a novel so closely, that's such an intimate experience. Writing is often an isolating process. To then, the book seems like the circle seems to expand, right? Like your agent reads it, and then publishers or editors read it, and then people get advanced copies and they read it. And then you're connected to people like Elizabeth, who we reached out on social media, and we connected because of the book really resonated with her. And it's wonderful that we live in an age where people can have, on social media, have this immediate access to you to share, like, hey, this book touched me and I really loved this, and this made me laugh, and this made me cry. And it's like, wow, as an author, like, that's what we write, to connect. So what a beautiful thing. That said, I do feel vulnerable. This book was just in here and here for a long time, and now, your baby's out there, and you can't necessarily protect it. And I've been very grateful and shocked by the reception and the intention. but there's this, there's this like fear when you're that exposed, like there are parts of me in this book and there's a vulnerability and there is, so it's a lot of excitement, overwhelming excitement, and just a little bit of anxiety.
Oh, I imagine.
I've heard a lot of authors talk about that, and I can see that where it's so vulnerable, it's such a personal thing, and you really can't control what happens after it leaves your hands, your heart. So I can see that with being, but I also love that we can connect this way. We can, people like Allison and I can find a book like this and say we are behind this, and we want, we've learned so much and laughed at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah.
It just takes me a lot to actually laugh at a book.
Oh, good. That's like such a great, thank you.
Oh my gosh. I still am thinking about the one that I laughed the hardest at, I think was where she was shot. And then I don't know if it was Farah who said like, well, at least you have a cane. I mean, I laughed so hard at that part. I was like, that is amazing.
Okay. I'm glad.
I do want to point out, someone wrote a really neat comment, and I wanted to read it aloud. It's C-Suite wrote, the sensibility of your writing dealing with the others affected by the abuse too is uplifting. Actually, I took it as self-defense and protection versus vigilante. So thanks for the vulnerability.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Really cool. I love that so much.
We always like to ask, I have a multiple questions for you since you do a really good job remembering my multiple questions, Parini. I'd like to know what authors inspire you. And even because we love your writing style. I can't wait for whatever you're coming out. I will be anything that you write, I'm going to be first in line to read. But what authors inspire you, even what books inspire you? And we always say at Fabled, we want to be windows and mirrors. And if we can learn more about, Indian culture, what books or authors would you recommend to us? And not just Indian, I mean, anything that inspires you from anyone, but also the Indian culture.
Absolutely. Let's see. Zadie Smith's White Teeth is a book I read, I think, at the right time in my writing career, about over a decade ago. And I love that novel so much. It's so ambitious and smart and sprawling and funny. And so Zadie Smith is absolutely great, huge influence on me. And I love the work. I love Lily King. I love Britt Bennett. I love, let's see. Oh, I'm like turning around. I'm like, what do I have? I feel like I could be here for a while. Oh, Lisa Tadeo, who wrote a novel called Animal. I'm obsessed with it. It's not for the part.
Three women. She wrote a book called
Yes, exactly. I believe that was her debut. And then I have not read Three Women, but I have read Animal, and it's stayed with me. Normally when I finish a book, I just start another one right away, but I needed like 2 days to piece together my identity before picking up another novel. It was so fantastic. I also love like Andrew Sean Greer, who wrote Less, and more recently Less is Lost. So comedic, so funny, like a lot of physical comedy, a lot of one-liners, and I absolutely eat that up. I love comedy, so I believe that's been his work and the character of Less have been quite an influence on me. And from the Indian, like the South Asian front, I read Jhumpa Lahiri in college, and it absolutely informed my work, primarily because up until I read Jhumpa Lahiri, all my characters were white, and I didn't even realize that.
Her book, Interpreter of Maladies, is my favorite short story collection of all time. I love it.
Yeah, it's a perfect collection. It's so good. That's another one I return to time and time again. And I seek the translations of Monto and Ismet Shugdai, and I can type these out, but there are various translations of both their works because they were Urdu writers, and around the time of partition, and partition is in my other works, it's a subject and a history that I explore in other facets of my writing. And so those two writers have really influenced me. And I love reading translations and different translations to just see how translators operate. That's like a very interesting, probably nerdy exercise of mine.
No, I think it's an art when you find a book that's translated and then it's so compelling. You're like, I know there's a translator in here who has worked so hard to make it.
Yeah,
Like,
that translator has worked so hard to disappear. Like they put all this effort into just non-existing, so it's just the author and the reader, and it's like, what wonderful, brilliant work. It's just painstaking. Wow.
So true. I know that we're of course offering most American publications, but I always admire bookstores or people who are selling those books in translation, because there's so much of the world that is published that we have no access or that we don't even know about, honestly. That's super sure. Well, I would love to hear if you are working on anything right now, which I'm assuming you are, since your book is a success. So I'm sure your agent's like, okay, next project.
Yes. I am working on a new novel. I don't outline, and so I'm not sure where it's going yet, but I am excited. It is in the comedic vein, and it thus far seems to center around a happier marriage.
Okay. So interesting. Well, if you're okay, Parini, we're going to also introduce right now our next book for our next book club. But I could talk to you forever, and I would have so many questions about like, who's your favorite comedian over there. I'm afraid I would lose people because I love comedians so much. But I'm like, she's so funny. She of course has to have a favorite.
Oh, we definitely do. We can side chat about that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll just email each other. But I am hoping and praying that Mindy Kaling is just, your next email coming through, and she's going to make this a mini series is my hope. So when that happens, please let us know.
Yes,
it would be amazing, right?
I would love it. It would be a dream come true to see these characters come to life. Like it would be a dream.
It really would. But I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth. And then while she is talking about our next book, I'm going to post the sign up for that Zoom and the link to buy that book in the chat.
So our March book club is Reef Road by Deborah Goodrich Royce. I think you can see it on my phone here. They're very hard to keep in the store. The minute we get them in the store, they're sold. It's another book that's got a Black background with very vibrant colors. That must be our 2023 thing. But this is a fascinating sort of a fictionalized true crime story based on the author's mother actually lost her best friend to an unsolved murder when she was a little girl. And Deborah has written about it. I think she was also an actress on All My Children. So we can talk to her about that too, but that'll be in March. It's again, one of my favorite books of the year. But we're excited about that. And Parini, this was just a dream come true getting to talk to you today.
Thank you for having me. This is so delightful.
I shouldn't say this, but we sold more of this one than any other for our currently reading book club book. Everyone loved it so much. So,
oh, that's so great to hear. I appreciate all your support, and for everybody joining us. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening.
Well, we're cheering you on, and we will sell even more of these books because I know anyone who's read it here will be pushing it into other people's hands. And I can't wait to see what you come up with next.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everybody. Hope you sign up for our next month's book club, and we will see you then.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye.